In this, the last series in the data integration section of the Learning Center, we're going to show how you can populate different types of widgets using the data integration features, but just using JavaScript. So let's bring into view here this app that's up and running, and I'll show you how it works. First of all, we've got the mini dashboard. This contains two graphs. The first one is a 2-series column chart, and then we have up here a pie chart showing the distribution of sales by country. So first of all, let's go back to the app and see how we actually create that. Before we start, we need to define our data views in the same way that we did in the previous examples where we're using the automated population features using the data section. What I have to do is to click on the application properties button or the background here, and then bring up the data view manager by clicking on the views property. Here we can see that we're accessing 3 different views. So these are pointing to the customers query, customer orders query. We saw how to do that in an earlier video. So what happens to start with is when the app starts, we want to preload a couple of things. In fact, we're going to preload both of those charts, and we're going to preload the, let's just show you here, we're going to pre-populate this list. So we select the application background again, and we can see that we've got an on-app started event set up. So if I click on that, you can see here at the top we're actually populating the list, the mobile list with countries. Now, almost all of the functions that you're going to see here are doing the same thing. They're calling the getViewData function, and then afterwards they're either calling the populateWidget function to take the return data and populate it into the widget, or the setData function, which does the same thing. So let me just explain the typical structure. What we do is we set up an array of field expressions. These expressions are actually as defined in the previous video where it shows how to populate widgets using the property bar. There's an expression editor in there. That explains, as does the user guide, how to format these expressions. Very simple. So here, for instance, we're asking to have the country returned, customers.country, and the count of customers in the country. So for this sort of aggregated query, we also need to specify a group by expression. So we're grouping it by customer country. And then we're doing the ordering. So we set up an order array. We're just ordering on one field, which is the country. So it's just one element in that array. And a filter array, which in this case is empty. So next thing we do is say call getViewData. The first parameter is the name of the data view. Then the fields array. And now a callback function. This gets called as soon as the server returns with the data. Then here you can see data splice. What we're doing here is to remove the first row, or the 0th row if you like, from the return data, because that just contains a header row of the fields that have been returned. And then finally we're calling app populate widget. And we're populating the countries, the mobile list countries widget, with this data using this mapping object. This has been discussed in other videos, and it's also described in the user guide, how to use populate widget. So I'm not going to go into that here in any more detail. The extra parameters, such as the filter, the group array, and the order array, are specified as the last 3 parameters. So that's how we actually populate the list. And here you can see how we populate the pie chart. Everything is exactly the same. In fact, it's exactly the same query, so I could have perhaps been a bit more efficient and merged those together. And then the last thing here is the multi-series chart. Exactly the same approach: fields, group, order, and filter. Now, for multi-series charts, what you need to be aware of is for each series, you either have to go and make an individual getViewData request, or you combine in this case the 2 years of data, 2003 and year 2004, into a single query, and then you split it up in code, which is what I'm doing here. So again, it's exactly the same structure. We're calling now though customer orders. You can see here that the fields that are being returned are a little bit more interesting. We've got some functions being embedded in here: the year, the short month name, and then the count. And those are the things that populate the different components inside our mobile list. Here's the grouping. We're grouping by year and then by month. We're making sure that it comes back in order of year and month. And finally, we're applying a filter. So I'm only interested in years 2003 and 2004. So that then comes back in here. Again, I splice out the first row so I don't get the header data. And now I'm just going to go through 1 year and then the next, split that up into 2 separate arrays, and then use the setData command to populate my chart with the first series and then the second series. And here the series names can be specified like that. So all of the other functions that you saw there actually function in exactly the same way. They're all using that getViewData in very slight variations. And so hopefully that explains how to use JavaScript to interact with integration.